Like talking to myself. All right. So thank you all for coming to our October collab meeting. Um, we're going to start with some introductions. Normally we just do name and affiliation, so your title and your organization. But I'm also going to throw in your favorite Halloween costume. So this could be like a past costume of yours, or maybe like the costume that your kid is going to be going for this year. But whatever comes to mind. And this is a very cute picture of me and my siblings when we were kids. I'm the youngest, so I'm the tiger here. But then my brother's in the middle, Tyler, and then my sister is Shannon, and she is a vampire, I guess. And my brother is someone from Star Wars. I'm not really up on Star Wars. Is it Anakin, maybe? That would be my guess. Cool. Okay, so we'll run down the list and do some introductions. I'll start with Aaliyah. I'll put you in the hot seat first.
Hello, hello. I am Aaliyah Casso. I'm a conservation agent from Shrewsbury. Um, and I'm usually like a witch or a fairy, something magical from the
Nice.
woods.
Love it. Love it. Cool. Donna?
Donna Williams, Blackstone River Coalition and Blackstone Heritage Corridor. My favorite costume was one we made for our son, who's now 49. He
Oh,
was 3. He had an affection for crawfish, and he called them clawfish. So we made this huge red paper mache claw for him. Of course, people thought he was really weird when he was trick-or-treating, and he had trouble holding the bag with this claw. But
oh my gosh. That's so cute.
home, homemade.
Yeah, those are always the best costumes, the homemade ones.
Yeah.
Danielle?
Buddy, I'm Danielle. I'm from the Narragansett Bay Estuary Program. I'm their watershed outreach manager. And I would say my favorite Halloween costume is one my mom made for me when I was about 4 years old. I'll have to see if I can find any pictures of it. She made me this homemade Little Red Riding Hood costume, and it was really great because it was functional too. It was warm for, October when everything's like freezing when you're outside. So I always think about that.
Very cute. Yeah, it's always chillier than you think, so it's good to have a warm costume.
Yes.
Okay, Dan?
I'm Dan Giza. I'm a fishery biologist with Verdantis and also a Tatnick Watershed Association member. My favorite costume, my wife and I were David and Maura Rose from Schitt's Creek a few years ago, and that was a pretty big hit.
Nice, love it. Amelia?
Hi, my name is Amelia. I'm from the Worcester Green Corps, and my favorite Halloween costume was when I was a kid, I couldn't decide on what I wanted to be. So I was a vet, a cat, a doctor, and a queen.
That's awesome. I love it. Katie Liming.
Hi, everyone. My name's Katie Liming. I'm the Lakes and Ponds coordinator for the city of Worcester. I love a good animal costume, so I've been a squirrel, I've been a cow, all the classics. Good things.
Love it. Love the cow. Okay. Emma Glides game speaker.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Gilda's Game. I'm with the Nature Conservancy, and as a kid, I have two younger siblings, and for some reason, my mom decided that we were going to do like a group costume, but we are all very different people. So maybe we were like 1, 3, and 5. And I was the Tooth Fairy. And I like had like a pink fluffy dress and fairy wings and all that stuff. My brother was a pirate who had lost a tooth. And so he stuck a raisin on his tooth for the pictures. And then my little sister was the tooth. So
Oh, that's so
she just
cute.
had like a big, like, I think they just took like two pieces of big paper and cut it out like a tooth and put it over her. So that was, I think, the best way to create a group costume that let each of us be what we wanted to be.
Yeah,
Loved it.
very cute. Morgan.
Hi, I'm Morgan. I work on sediment transport at Clark University. I'm from France, so I've had no experience of costuming myself as a result. But no, I have a 1-year-old and I can have fun. And he's going to be a little squirrel this year, and I picked
Oh,
it and I liked it. So
so cute. We'll have to get you a costume too.
yeah, I should. Yeah, when I have a bit more time, I'll take care of myself.
Nick.
Morning, everyone. This is Nick Cohen from the Horsley Witten Group. In my family, the rule was very strict. You had to make your own costume. So my favorite costume when I was a kid was I was an autumn leaf. Apparently, my parents tried to dissuade me from embarrassing myself, but I would not be convinced. So I was an autumn leaf when I was, I think, 5 or 6 years old.
That is so cute. I love that. Kate.
In a surprise to probably no one, I am very into Halloween. I'd love to share my screen
Sure.
because you see, yeah. All right, so this is my favorite costume that I made. I was very big into Doctor Who in 2011. So I used an old prom dress and I created this Dalek costume. But then more recently, anybody here familiar with the series of books called The Ninth House by Lee Bardugo? Yeah, I see Emma's mouth opening. Yes. So I was Nana Gismus for Halloween. I almost said Christmas in 2021. And I'm super happy with the way this one came out. I found one of those old skeletons that people have in their yards and I like cut it up and made a corset and I learned how to do skull paint. So I
Wait, so you're
really
not
like
sharing your screen
Halloween.
right now. Can you reshare? I'm not seeing anything.
Oh, you didn't see anything. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Share.
Perfect.
You see that
Oh,
now? That's not a G's miss.
yes.
And this is my Dalek from 2011.
Oh my God, so good. I
I
love
can't
it.
believe you did a Dalek.
Don't throw
That
anything away. That's my motto.
that's awesome. I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. That
Yeah. I
is
had a face. Oh, and for folks who don't know me, I really like costumes. My name's Kate. I am Save the Bay's Narragansett Bay Riverkeeper, and I'm also on the board for the collab.
Yes, awesome. Heather Conkerton. I think we have two Heathers today, maybe. Conkerton.
I'm with Forest Three Rivers. I'm their ecological restoration coordinator, and this is actually, I think, the first time I've been. And unfortunately, I have to drop off in about 15 minutes because I have another meeting. I don't remember Halloween because it's so long ago. I don't have kids. But I grew up in New Orleans and we went to Mardi Gras every year. And it used to be that so that's the only thing I can reference. And it used to be that you dressed up every year. I don't think a lot of people do that now, but I'm a figure skater, so we used to dress as ice skaters. So that was usually our standard costume. But I really want to dress like a Dalek because that's awesome.
I love this. We're like exchanging Halloween costume ideas now. Cool. We'll go to the other Heather Perry.
Hi, I'm Heather Perry. I'm with the Blackstone River Coalition. And my favorite, so I have 3 kids and my daughter, we have the kind of make your own costume thing. And she 1 year was a hot dog. And the year after that, she was a superhero. So then the following year, she just combined the two and it actually came out really cute.
I love that.
She was
So
superhero
creative.
hot dog. Yep.
Awesome. Ted Bouvet.
Yeah, hi, Ted Beauvais from the Blackstone River Watershed Association. And I think my kids had a lot of costumes over the years, but I think the one we enjoyed the most was when my son was about 5 or 6. he and his best friend Buddy both dressed up as Ghostbusters, and they were convinced, that they were the real thing. It was pretty funny.
Oh, cute. What a classic. Okay, Amanda Paulhus.
Hi, I'm Amanda Paulus. I'm a aquatic invasive species intern at Rhode Island DEM, and I think my favorite costume when I was a kid, I liked to dress up as a witch, and I had like a bright orange wig with the long hair. That might have been my favorite.
Nice. Love that. Sarah Pletnicki.
Hello, I'm Sarah from the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission. I think my favorite costume is Shigo from the Kim Possible cartoon. One of my my favorite like childhood cartoons as a child, and I spent a lot of money on that costume, so I will be re-wearing it for forever.
Nice. Kim Possible is a classic. Vincent.
Hello, my name is Vincent. I'm the water coordinator for the town of Shrewsbury. My favorite costume, I have a couple, but one is like a noble wizard costume that's very fancy that I commissioned a LARPer from Italy to get. I don't know if I'm able to share my screen or something.
Yeah, totally.
That.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
I
That's
love
so
it.
cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. Amanda Coffier.
Hi, I'm Amanda Coffier with Upper Blackstone Clean Water. I'm currently out on the Blackstone right now. We're doing our data logger check because we monitor the DO throughout the summer. And okay, so my favorite Halloween costume. I feel like I don't have any good ones. One year I did dress up as a Statue of Liberty, which was not that cool, but I guess it was like interesting. My nephew is dressing up as his dog for Halloween this year, and it's like the cutest thing ever. So I absolutely love animal costumes. Yeah.
Very cool. I've always wanted to do Statue of Liberty, but I have yet to do it. And thanks for joining in while you're in the field. Carrie, thanks.
Hi, I'm Carrie Banks with the Division of Ecological Restoration. And your Tigger costume brought back memories of my son's first Halloween, where he had a similar Tigger costume. And the thing was, he loved to just climb around in leaves. So he kept piling up leaf piles and going into the leaf pile and then popping out as Tigger. So it's very, very cute. Brought back a lot of great memories.
Oh, cute. I love it. Shireen.
Hi, I'm Shireen Hamade. I'm the Visitor Services Supervisor at the Blackstone River and Canal Heritage State Park with DCR. I'm trying to think. I've had a lot of really good costumes. One of my favorites though that I will never forget, when I was younger, my mom, I might have been like 8. My mom really wanted me to be a cheerleader, and she even borrowed one of my cousin's actual cheerleading outfits. I really wanted to be a zombie, though, so we compromised, and she did bloody face makeup on me. So I was a zombie cheerleader that year. So
That's awesome. Oh, I love that. And I think our last person is Bill. So Bill, I saw you joined a little bit later. We're just doing some introductions, name, affiliation, and your favorite Halloween costume. It can be your costume, your kid's costume, whatever pops into your head.
Bill Napolitano. I'm with the Taunton River Watershed Alliance and Taunton River Stewardship Council. We made my son a robot costume when he was in grade school with everything that worked on it. He lit up, he had a working phone, he had all of this stuff. And this was way back in the day. This was pre-2000. So it was pretty cool.
That's awesome. Very cool. Robot's a classic too. Okay, so I think that's everyone. Did I miss anyone? No? Okay, great. And so next we'll move into our presentation from Emma Gildesgame. Did I get it right the second time?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. And she is the climate adaptation scientist with the Massachusetts Nature Conservancy. And they created a report on equitable, sustainable climate funding. So I'll turn it over to Emma.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to steal the screen sharing. So I am just one of the many people who worked on this. So I'm Emma Gildesgame. I'm the climate adaptation scientist, but this was really a several-year labor of love with Steve Long, who is our director of policy and partnerships, and Emily Myron, who is our policy manager. Her title just changed and I can't remember what it is. And Leslie Pond, who is a very committed TNC volunteer. So these are just some of the few names that I just have to get out there at the beginning. Today, well, come on, slides. There we go. I'm really going to focus, I'm going to kind of follow the structure of the report. So this report was the culmination of about 2 years of, many years of work with a ton of people. And how we did the work was just as important as what we actually produced. So I'm going to actually I'll start with like what the project was and why we did it. But then really we tried to build new systems of how to engage on work like this and policy development work. And then we'll get into like what we actually recommended. But it's been over a year since we kind of wrapped up that phase of the project. So I'll talk a little bit about what's happened then and what's next. And I will try to do all of that in my allotted time. With space for questions. So the report is at this QR code and this bit.ly. This will show up again, and I will share the slides with Kaylee and stuff so you guys can all see them. But if you want to see the report and kind of follow along, it's there. I guess I didn't leave you much time to look at it, but it'll come back. The bottom line, we all know this, climate change is expensive, right? Like we know that we don't have enough money, even though we don't quite know how much we actually need to both reduce the emissions and remove greenhouse gases that are causing climate change, and also to deal with the impacts that we are already seeing and will continue to see. We also know that current funding systems aren't meeting the need in ways that work towards a more just and equitable society. We know that current funding systems disproportionately give money to wealthier, whiter communities, that low income, limited English proficiency, rural, like all sorts of underrepresented communities are not getting getting even less, are getting disproportionately more costs and disproportionately less funds to deal with them. So this project came together, sorry for this very wordy slide. This project came together initially because back in like 2018, there was a lot of tension around, do we need to focus all of our efforts on reducing carbon emissions, or do we need to focus efforts on climate adaptation? So dealing with the climate impacts that we're already facing. And so this project initially started by bringing people to bring people together to say, wait, hold on, we have to do both. Like all of us fighting over these limited resources and having tension over where should this money go is missing the point, which is that we need to do both. And eventually what we realized was that we needed to center and prioritize the communities who were being hit hardest and have the fewest resources to handle those impacts. And so we wanted to meet the funding needs. Massachusetts has really, really ambitious goals for climate change, both adaptation and mitigation. And so we wanted to make sure that we could get more funding. We wanted to make sure that we're capturing funding and getting funding in ways that are equitable. So some of the policies or some of the current funding sources take money from everybody's utility bills, put them into a big pool, and then the people who tend to be accessing those funds are not the lowest income folks. And so we really needed to address structural and societal equities, both in how we raise the money and how we spend it. And to do that, it couldn't just be a bunch of TNC folks sitting in a room. We had to create this really unwieldy, complicated process where we were constantly bringing in new voices, constantly bringing in new partners. We had our funders. So this NAPGR is an internal TNC funding source. The Bar Foundation gave us funding to do a lot of the like non-legislative side of things, the coalition building and partnership building. We had legislative sponsors in both the House and the Senate in Massachusetts. We had equity consultants, we had funding consultants. We created this core team to manage the whole process that had both kind of the traditional environmental nonprofits and community-based organizations, both from environmental justice and from other sectors. And we also engaged with a lot of community-based organizations who weren't on the core team. And the full list is in the report, but I think this kind of messy web of how everybody was connected is a really important piece to understand of how this process took, kind of how this process evolved. Because really what we worked to do was started at the end. We started by saying, if we do this right, what will we accomplish? And so we started with the end, and then we figured out how do we get there? And we had these points, these kind of purple arrows are these engagement points where we went back out to more community partners, more people across basically anybody who we could get to talk to us about this project, we talked to about this project, to really say, how is this working? How does this land with your experience of how funding works in the state right now? Are you interested in being more involved, which we'll get to in a second? And so all of that had to happen before we could ever get into this like actual drafting legislation and filing legislation piece. And so this is another like chaotic slide, which I'm keeping all these as chaotic intentionally because this was a fairly chaotic process where we had a lot of things going on. We started by developing equitable decision making. So how are we going to make decisions as a group in ways that attend to power dynamics and ways that kind of make sure that we're accomplishing what we're setting out to, which is truly changing our systems so that we have a more equitable outcome. So I'll talk about the guardrails and guidelines and all of this in a later slide. But all of that was happening simultaneously with some really technical analyses of financial programs and the core team reviewing those and kind of bouncing back and forth between this equity stream and the financing stream before we brought it all together into a legislative proposal. So this is truly the simplified version of what we did from 2021 to 2023. We are still, I could extend this box here with the final filed legislation, the administrative engagement, sharing the findings, all of this is extending to now. But to really understand how we got to the ultimate legislation that we filed and the report that we wrote, it really starts from this equitable processes. We know that TNC is the world's biggest environmental organization, that we have a ton of money and a ton of power, and that's not always, that hasn't always aligned well with the ways that community-based organizations want to be working, that we haven't always been the best partner, and kind of going back through history. And so to really create something different, we had to build some pretty basic but really important community agreements. So these community agreements really started with how are we showing up to meetings? How are we showing up in this project in general? I actually have a slide later on with all of the core team agreements, but it's fairly standard things. It's show up for each other. It's make voice, like take space, make space. But it was also committing to uphold the decision-making frameworks and the guardrails and guidelines, and also committing that each of us had accountability to engage in good faith and also to say something if there was something going wrong. And so these community agreements seem simple, but we actually started every single meeting with a slide that reviewed the community agreements and said, you know, we asked people to spend I think we spent 3 minutes at the top of every single meeting just quietly reviewing the agreements and choosing one to hold close, and to hold themselves and others accountable to. And that really created a space where we could have really hard conversations about decision-making frameworks. We actually have an entire equitable decision-making tool, which is linked here. It's linked in the report, but it's all about, okay, consensus often leaves people out. How do we create decision-making frameworks where people aren't getting sort of coerced into agreeing with something, that like we really are attending to these power dynamics to make sure that the way that we're making decisions aligns with the outcomes that we want. And this kind of top piece really I am trying to carry into all of my other work is these guardrails and guidelines that from the beginning, I'm actually going to go to them now, set a really clear, strong foundation for equity outcomes. So the guardrails were like non-negotiables for both process and outcome. So we had guardrails for equitable partnerships. So we committed that the CBOs, the environmental justice partners, the groups that traditionally and generally have less power in these spaces and systems were the experts and decision makers, that they were compensated for their time and expertise, and that they got to decide what their desired level of engagement was. And that was really important, of like, you tell us how you want to be involved. And then for the funding, we had really specific guardrails, and these again are in far more detail in the report. So the funding couldn't be regressive. It couldn't take money from everybody and only give it to wealthy folks. It couldn't exacerbate existing harms. It had to provide consistent and long-term funding to communities. And we wanted funding that wasn't just kind of like one-hit wonder funding. We wanted funding that really worked towards systemic changes. So the guardrails were the non-negotiables. The guidelines were our kind of directional signs. So we wanted, there's far more guidelines, but these are some examples of things that we wanted to prioritize. And we co-created these with we co-created these and then revisited these with our partners. And so we were only going to consider outcomes that met the guardrails, and we strove to meet as many of the guidelines as possible. But having these visible and consistently agreed to really was critical to building trust, especially between folks whose organizations had sometimes been at odds. And so we really undertook this like adaptive, iterative outreach approach where we just kept coming back to people. So we like crowdsourced a big list of who should we be talking to. We did some prioritization of how are we going to talk to folks. We had the community-based organizations met with our equity consultants. And then twice we did these big, broad surveys to get input from folks who hadn't had time, interest, hadn't been connected in to be part of earlier phases. And often folks in the surveys joined the core team and were part of the project later on. So this is continuing to now of kind of this ongoing evolution of the legislation and the next steps. But really, we learned a lot about how to really engage and build this kind of really broad coalition. And what we realized was clarity was absolutely critical. We know, as I think many of you know, that, oh yeah, we're compensating partners, like we want to co-create. And compensation wasn't enough because everybody's busy and we weren't compensating them enough to hire a whole new person. So we had to provide a menu of options and build a relationship to really understand where's our overlaps here. And just kind of obsessive clarity on what was going on and actually giving time during meetings for people to do pre-work, or not pre-work. Instead of pre-work, giving people time to actually do things during the meetings. So looking at the clock and realizing that we're flying through this, but we actually, so our funding consultant gave us a list of 18 different funding options that had been used to raise money for climate programs in the past. And we put them all on a Jamboard, RIP Jamboard. We put them all on a Jamboard and had people really look at the pros of that funding option. Yellow was kind of challenges that we could overcome by the way that we wrote legislation. Orange was challenges that just may not be solvable. Pink were this is a deal breaker. It is not in line with the guardrails. It is not in line with it's not supportive of the guidelines. And then blue was like questions, caveats. So we did this over like an entire summer. So I think we had 3 monthly meetings where we created and worked with this document, and people really wrestled with what are the options that work best for us. And so we reviewed different types of taxes and fees and bonds and special districts and compliance payments. They're all in the report. But back to that decision making, we had a really clear kind of we came to an agreement on how do we decide? So after we had all those inputs from the Jamboards, we basically said, is this compatible with the guardrails and guidelines? There were a couple that were completely eliminated because they weren't. If they were, how hard would it be to source the funds equitably? If it was going to be hard to source them equitably, we eliminated it. If it was possible but could raise a lot of money, then it moved on. If it was easy to source equitably, it got to skip forward regardless of how much money it could raise. And then ultimately what we came to was a proposed really small fee on property and casualty insurance. And so I'm not actually going to spend a ton of time talking about that proposed fee. There's more information in the report because I think that what's actually far more interesting is the approach. I think spoiler alert for a couple slides from now, the legislation did not move forward. We are working with insurance companies and other partners to understand what could this look like and how could we make this functional in the future. But right now it's not moving forward. It didn't make it through the 2023-24 legislative session. But I think this process, along with this decision-making kind of 1 to 5 tool, was really, really helpful for getting to a place where the core team was in agreement. And we also had a long conversation of what should we be able to spend the money on. We had some agreement on what we absolutely shouldn't spend the money on. But what we realized and decided was that we shouldn't dictate how the money should be spent, that we should have a menu of options, but that the best outcome is allow communities to choose from a menu to say, this is what we need and this is what works for us. So we had a lot of conversation about how much dictation should we have over how the money is spent. And ultimately, this is the act that we filed in January 2023. It produces a fee on property and casualty insurance. It puts it into a dedicated trust fund, which was basically the best way that we could come up with to protect these funds and make sure that we actually had control over, not we, but that the act and the governance board that we were going to create actually had control over how those funds got spent. And also it allowed other funds to go into there. So we could, work with other legislators and other folks to add funds to this trust fund. And this fund would be managed by a trust that is represented by 2/3 community-based organizations. So I think I forgot to mention, we define community-based organizations as organizations that are led by and accountable to members of an environmental justice or otherwise underrepresented community. And so the focus is on community climate priorities, funding prioritizes low income and EJ communities, which, as I think all of you know, it's tricky to like specifically, there's some legal boundaries about what you can actually say. But that the fund that the board could either choose to enhance existing funding or create new funding. And that there's really specific things about how the funding could be spent, or sorry, how the funding was allocated. So grant requirements, reporting requirements, things like that, to reduce the barriers to actually getting state funding for folks, with the goal of increased funding for climate programs that center equity and justice. So that was over a year ago. The bill was went to committee, and we had a hearing in committee, and we had some support. There was a lot of bills looking at climate funding, and ours was ultimately not moved forward. So being sent to study basically means it's not completely out, but it will have to be revisited in the next legislative session. The Healy-Driscoll administration has, though, been incorporating environmental justice and climate funding in ways that really align with what we were shooting for and what we were working towards. And we are reconvening the core team in November to revisit the bill and make a plan for what's next, given everything that's changed in the last year and a half. And the spot where I come in is really sharing this report and our learnings to be a foundation for other folks who I know are also thinking about this really deeply. And so, as promised, here's all those links again. There is a nature.org story on the TNC website that talks about the process, and it's very comprehensive. The full report is at this link. If you have questions about process, reach out to me. If you have questions about like the actual policy side of things or the core team, Steve Long is your guy. So I have not been able to see the chat while I've been talking, but I'm happy to answer questions or anything that folks would like to hear more about. I have a couple of reference slides that I didn't include here. So if you have specific questions, I might actually even have a slide about it.
Great. Thank you so much, Emma. I learned a lot from that.
Glad.
Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, Ted.
Yeah, so I was wondering, since you came up with this additional fee associated with insurance, at what point did you engage with the insurance industry and with the people who pay insurance premiums? How were they brought into this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so Steve Long is the one who knows more specifically because he was the point person on that. But once we realized that insurance premiums were going to be the potential funding source, we started reaching out to insurance groups. There were a series of meetings, I want to say 3 or 4. We actually came to like the funding. We came to the funding option pretty late in the game. Like we had a lot of iteration. And so it was, I want to say, as the legislation was going through the process, we were also engaging with the insurance industry. And they had some recommendations. We're still iterating the bill. The fun part about like the bill went in, but it's still in committee, so we can still be working to change it. And so there's some changes that are coming from the conversations with the insurance industry. In terms of the ratepayers, one of the really big concerns that we had was we didn't want to create prohibitive costs. So it's tied to property and casualty insurance, but there's waivers. And so for low income folks, and there's a whole bunch of mechanisms that frankly I wasn't involved with that piece of it. But there's been ongoing conversations with community advocates and the insurance industry. And so Steve has a lot more on that if you have questions. And the report has more.
Great. Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Kate. You mentioned CBOs, and I kind of read between the lines. I think those are community-based organizations.
Oh, yes.
Can you give us an example of, so first thing, I love to find jargon and pick it out because I understand how alienating jargon can be. Can you give us examples of what community-based organizations you worked with and like how they were valuable and how you found them?
Yeah,
Decided to
absolutely.
work with.
Yeah, so let me go back to, so we define community-based organizations as organizations that were led by, rooted in, and accountable to a specific community. So that could be a geographic community, that could be an identity community. And so some of our most active, actually, I can bring up the whole list. Some of our most active community-based organizations were environmental justice groups, like the Groundworks. We had Groundwork Lawrence was really heavily involved. Groundwork Somerville was less so involved. We also had like My Brother's Table, which is not an environmental organization. They are a soup kitchen and service agency that supports low-income folks on the North Shore. And so they were connected in because they had been involved with some heat island relief advocacy. And so let me drop this link in the chat and then pull up the other thing that I was going to pull up. But the full list of community-based organizations is not loading. There we go. So we've reached them a lot of times. It was word of mouth. So this is not all of them because some of them didn't want their names or organizations formally associated with this. I am sharing the wrong thing. Hold on. Oh no, yeah. Can you all see this long list? So the ones that counted for us, so Healthcare Without Harm, Groundwork Lawrence, Groundwork Somerville. We had a bunch of health ones that were connected again through the urban heat relief networks and work. And so we reached out. We did our absolute best to do warm outreach rather than cold outreach because
What
we
does
knew
that
that
mean?
email, phone, flyers, going to
Okay.
meetings, announcing at meetings. You name how you can possibly reach out to somebody, and we tried it.
Okay. And what's the what's a warm outreach? I've never heard that term before.
So cold outreach is, hi, I read your website. Your website looks cool. Can we talk? Warm
Okay.
outreach is, hey, Kate recommended that I reach out because of our alignment here and here, or even better, you send the email and say, hey, I'd love to connect you. So known entities. So we did a snowball approach where we basically, every time we talk to somebody, we would say, who else should we talk to? Who else should we be engaging with? Who is not here's who's at the table right now. Who else should be at the table? Who isn't here yet? And so when we did that, we had a fair number of challenges there because everybody is overwhelmed and has too many emails and has too many meetings. And so there was a lot of, yeah, I'm in theory interested, but I'll get back to you later. And then we would follow up. So we found that the most effective way to actually turn from like, hello, we had an email, to we're having meaningful engagement and like meaningful interactions where we're sharing what we're interested in working on, you're sharing your interests, concerns, information, where it's really a multi-directional flow of information. And the best way for us to get from hey, it's nice to meet you, to that was to provide a full menu. So our full menu was, um, you can fill out this survey and we'll give you $50, basically. Fill out a survey, tell us what you think about some stuff. You can have a quick phone call just to hear about the project and tell us your initial thoughts. I think we had invitations to some already scheduled meetings, and then a choose your own adventure, tell us how you'd like to be involved. And there was compensation associated with all of them. And we often found, we actually found that some of our most committed kind of long-term CBO partners were folks who had filled out a survey that had been forwarded to them by somebody else. They'd kind of filled it out and like sort of forgot about it. And then when we followed up and said, here's how we incorporated what you and others told us in the survey into this next phase, they were like, oh, wait, we actually do want to be involved. And so it was show up, demonstrate that we listened to you the first time, show up again, and really like build that over time. We um we were really focused on um kind of this outreach to engagement. Have any of you guys seen this before? I love um this approach, which is the spectrum of community engagement to ownership. Um, there's a whole bunch more to this, and this is in the slide deck that I'll share. We were really focused on the beginning in the like, if we're anywhere other than in collaborate and defer to, we're doing it wrong. Like all of these are, especially consult and down, are like not great. And what we realized instead was thinking about it like a ladder of constantly providing an opportunity for folks to get involved by just hearing that this is happening and that we want their input and that we're building this with folks, and then providing an opportunity to, as folks are interested, move up to collaboration and really sharing power. Because when we started with, we want to collaborate and co-create with you, people are like, we don't care. This isn't our project. We got other stuff going on. But when we started by consulting and gathering input, then a lot of people kind of followed this thread and followed this ladder up to collaboration. And we've actually continued on several follow-up projects on different sort of related areas with some of these partners.
That's really great. Thank you for sharing. It's really great to see people working on the systemic and legislative, like big picture changes that need to happen, because I know that's not what I do and it's not really in my wheelhouse. So it's really cool to see that that work is also happening at the same time while other people are doing more locally based projects as well. So
we need it all.
We do.
And also, like, the biggest thing for us was the people who are doing the locally based work have deep insights on how is current funding falling short.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What are the barriers? What are things that we could do to do better at this? And so it's this kind of back and forth between, I get to think about systems change all the time at my job, but I can't do that without the on the ground knowledge.
Totally. Yeah, Morgan?
Yeah, this is great because I'm sure like everybody, like a lot of people here, we hear a lot about the wish of doing this. And the reality is like to do it well, as you kind of give an example, is like it takes a lot of time. And so I have a bit of maybe two questions, sort of like, can you tell us also just for clarity, how many people we paid, I guess you, to just do that, right? To really seriously do that. And then, because the reality is that I hear a lot of that conversation with smaller scale, like, and I'm sure Kaylee would love to do this. Like, we all really would like to be held. And then it's like, okay, but Kaylee has a million things to do. And then maybe she can spend 30 minutes a week doing this. So is this even like reasonable, or should people like even like partner up with like different collaboration, partner up and say like, okay, we do need to pay a person to just do that? Could you like just get if I, because I think this is very interesting to say, how do you actually do this and not just wish to do this?
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of like FTEs, from TNC, we had, I think it was probably about one full-time equivalent. So like one full-time person, but it was 3 people and a volunteer. So this was nobody's full-time job. But there were 3 of us who were spending about a third of our time on this, and it shifted. And having our consultants was incredibly helpful because we wouldn't have been able to do the really in-depth funding analysis, do a lot of the initial like drafting of outreach. And I think any of you who do community engagement know that like there's a bunch of stuff that just takes a lot of time of like sending emails, following up with emails, scheduling meetings, like all of that is really, really critical. And so what we did a lot of um, was we bought more capacity. And so we had funding from an internal TNC. TNC has some like internal competitive grants for different parts of the Nature Conservancy. And so we received one of those that specifically also required us to report back to other parts of TNC. So there's other TNC projects across the country that are actually building off of this. So there's one in Maryland that I know about, and there's a couple more that have used this and the report and the process in various ways. So it took a lot of time and it took a lot of money, which is one of the reasons that I really want to make sure that this report goes out far and wide. This is in no way a perfect, here is exactly the blueprint for how to do it. We did a thing, we learned a whole bunch of stuff. And now here it is for you all to pick up where we left off and keep going. And so systems change is hard and it takes a ton of time. And at one point, one of our partners described the process as plotting because it takes time to build trust and build community. And we couldn't have done this without building trust. And so that's where we really leaned on our equity consultant to facilitate those processes too. So that it wasn't TNC facilitating the process. It was um, it was the kind of external facilitator coming in and helping to level the playing field. And so it was a slow process. It is only feasible if you have a coalition who's willing to work on it. I don't think we've actually figured out like, okay, people from all these different organizations contributed this much time. This is how much like people hours went into this. But we compensated, let me pull up my folder of all of my contracts. We compensated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 partners, 7 different community-based organization partners, ranging from an individual to like kind of some of the larger environmental justice organizations. Were under contracts with TNC. 8 at various points in this as compensated community partners who were helping with a lot of the kind of local on the ground small scale outreach.
Great. Yeah, super interesting stuff. Thanks so much, Emma. So I think just because of time, we will transition to some of our other updates. Back to sharing my screen. And we'll jump right in. So first, water quality. Again, no CSO events since we last met. It's been pretty dry, as I'm sure you all know. So no CSO events there in Worcester. I am also working on a smaller, low-hanging fruit CSO project. I'm not exactly sure what it will be. If anyone has feedback or ideas, feel free to let me know. but these are just a couple of the things that I had in mind. So something that they did in Milwaukee was a water drop alert program. So they created a system that alerted anyone who signed up that lived within the CSO area when it was about to rain so that they could use less residential water. So like maybe taking a shower tomorrow versus today, or putting off doing laundry or using the dishwasher, things like that, that could save that little bit of water to reduce stress on the system. We've also talked about doing some kind of outreach program to residents in the CSO area, because when we first started looking at CSO, one of the major things we found was that people just don't know what CSO is. So, we have our CSO website that's up now that kind of gives a good 101 of what CSO is, but folks that it's affecting in the CSO area may not know, likely don't know, I would say. And then lastly, quantifying the stormwater capture from green infrastructure. This is also something that the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District did. So the Charles River Watershed Association has been working with Milwaukee to try to do like a peer-to-peer learning, talk about what they did and how we can implement it here in Mass and Rhode Island. There was a webinar, a really great webinar on what all the things that Milwaukee was doing. So the water drop alert program and the green infrastructure rainfall tracker are ideas from that webinar. The one issue is that it seems that, at least in Worcester, there are a lot of green infrastructure projects that have happened that are ongoing, but there's no one place where they're all like on a map or on a list. So we've been working with the city to figure out what's public, what's not public information, and how we can kind of put that into some kind of list that we can share out. And we also have our Blackstone TSO working group meeting that meets every other month. So I believe our next meeting is in November. So if you're interested in joining that, please let me know and I will add you to the list. Another thing that we've kind of taken up, I'm not sure if we talked about it at the last meeting, but we are interested in contaminated sediments. This is something that's pointed to a lot of the time in terms of dam removal. So we'll say, hey, why don't we remove this dam? And it's kind of shut down immediately. So no, there's probably toxic sediments and that would be expensive, difficult. And we've kind of just accepted that a little bit. So one of the things that the collab is trying to do is just kind of see what past studies there are about sediment and what information we need. So we've talked to Morgan, who works on sediment transport at Clark, and we've talked to Alex Hackman at Mass Audubon, who also does some sediment stuff. And we've talked about potential testing in the future. But really the first step is to create a database of all of the observations that exist of sediment chemical concentrations, which is way above my understanding of sediment stuff, but I'm gonna give it a shot. And then if we need to, get somebody else involved that knows what they're doing a little bit more than me, then that's what we'll do. So that's something that's on our radar. If you're interested, definitely let me know. If you have more information you want to share, feel free to let me know as well. No real updates on the bikeway or greenway from me. As far as university work, not really university, but high school, at the high school level, we are working with Worcester Technical High School to apply for a rooting resilience grant to start an urban forestry program there. So they would learn GIS, they would learn tree ID, they would learn working with drones was on the list as well. Really just lots of cool urban forestry stuff. This is a little picture of me hugging a tree at the bottom that I threw in that I thought was funny. So yeah, that's due Wednesday of next week. So we'll be working on that at the start of the next couple days of next week. And quick update on Fish Passage. So we had another community advisory group meeting for the Fish Passage project yesterday, which was really great. So I just threw in a couple updates about that project. So we are looking to hire a project manager to kind of put all of the pieces together. And we're still working towards getting that up and running, but we do have the funding from the Narragansett Bay Estuary program secured, so that's really great. Right now, we're just working on finding match and also figuring out where physically and also organizationally this person will sit. So we have a couple different organizations, DEM, NIBNR, so just kind of working out the last details of that. And then that job description will be up hopefully soon. Also, we talked a lot about Elizabeth Webbing Dam and the idea of that dam as a linchpin for the project. So incorporating that in future grant applications that we apply to. So including Elizabeth Webbing will make sure that more river miles will be opened up if the project goes through. So kind of quantifying that as our next step after Slater Mill and Main Street. And we've also secured funding for planning and design, which will kind of be the next step in the process. So we're excited about that. I think I've all bugged you about this, but I'm going to bug you again. So if you have any restoration priorities that you'd like to share with us, we created a survey for you to do just that. So we are creating a Blackstone Restoration Priority Action Plan. It has a lot of dams that we want to remove or hope to remove one day, culverts that need to be replaced, and any other restoration projects that you can think of that are priority to you. I know we all work in different capacities in different communities, so it's difficult for us at the watershed level to kind of suss out exactly where all of the restoration opportunities are. But yeah, Morgan.
Yeah, just a quick question, comment, and maybe that relates a bit to the talk is like, so like this is I could imagine this is the kind of things where if we had already a map or like that would be what the database would be good for. If we had already a map to share, like even print on flyers and share to people, we go to meeting or collaborate and say like, look, you're actually close to this dam. Like sort of like I think a lot of people might just not know where they are. Like even just in Worcester, but I'm sure it's all over the watershed. Anyway, so that's related to that. I could see how hopefully in our future the Bekiko database could help to also like reach out to like communicate, because I really think just a lot of people just don't know. So you're gonna get a lot of people who kind of know, so there will be like a very small fraction who knows like what's around them. So
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And a lot of the dams that we're focused on potentially moving forward for removal now are dams that are kind of in the middle of nowhere. And that's because when they're out in the center of town, a lot of times communities really value those dams. They don't want to take away the pretty waterfall, all of that. So if you remove a dam that is in the middle of the woods that nobody's really seeing or caring about, you have a better shot at getting the community on board. But definitely, yeah, showing where these dams are in relation to where people hike and where people recreate and how much it could improve the ecological health. Definitely that is one angle that we could work with for sure. Also, a quick update for the city of Woonsocket. They are working on a greenway along Truman Drive to reduce stormwater pollution to the Blackstone. And they got 2 grants from SWIG in 2021 and 2023, and then used that as leverage for more funding from the Rhode Island Department of Transportation and the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. So that project broke ground in September, which is very cool and exciting. So great stuff in Woonsocket. And then I also just wanted to mention the Dam and Seawall Program grants that came out. There were 23 projects awarded, and 2 were in the Blackstone. In Sutton, there was the Stevens Pond Dam rehabilitation. So not a removal, but making it safer, which is always good too. And then in Worcester, the Pine Hill Reservoir Dam improvements. So again, not a removal, but pretty good anyway. So this is a picture of Stevens Pond Dam in Sutton. Or Stevens Pond, not the dam, clearly, because there's no dam in the picture. Cool, so those are my quick updates, and I'll turn it over to you. Feel free to raise your hand or just unmute yourself or throw updates in the chat.
I had a little update related to the sediment and dredging, or related to sediment, as part of.
We're having trouble hearing you.
Sorry, is that better? Forgot to put my little thingy down. There you go. I have a little sediment update. As part of Mass DOT is proposing to do some improvements along Route 20 in Shrewsbury and Worcester, and as part of that, historically, a lot of the stormwater in that district, because it's very, very aggressively developed, is the stormwater was pretty sediment laden, and it was dumping right into Flint Pond, which is part of Lake Quinsigamond and the headwaters of the Blackstone. So they have as part of their project to improve the area, they're going to do a dredge feasibility study for the outfall of that area. So it will be a very, very tiny section of the Blackstone, but it may give an idea of kind of what the stormwater outflow has looked like in the last probably 50 years. And what all is kind of being carried along in that sediment as it gets to the pond. So that should be available sometime late next year, but it'll be a slight, tiny little piece of the pie that might offer some clarity, especially from our stormwater influence.
Great. Yeah, any stormwater work, we'll take it.
We got them to install deep sump catch basins, or hooded deep sump catch basins from Route 122 to Flint Pond in that corridor too. So that'll be just a little bit of reduction in sediment.
That's great. Great news.
Yeah, hi, Ted Beauvais with the Blackstone River Watershed Association. We're continuing to work on a supplemental environmental project. It has education component as well as some on-the-ground activities, and been meeting with DCR and trying to move that forward. It would be around from the Blackstone Visitor Center in Worcester down to Millbury to the trailhead for that section of the Blackstone River Bike Trail Greenway, and some projects in there. Also, we have our annual meeting. It's in the events calendar that was sent out with the agenda for this meeting. But on November 15th, we're having our annual meeting at the Heritage Corridor offices down in Whitensville. And we're pleased to have Tom O'Shea, the Commissioner of Mass Fish and Game. We tried to ask for a speaker and didn't ask for him specifically. And I was surprised that he said, sure, he would do it. I understand he lives in Holden. And he likes to get out and do these kinds of things. It's about a 40 capacity venue. We have room. There's a registration process, so we can get a good head count. And after his presentation, we'll buy everybody a beverage at the nearby, across the parking lot, Murder Hill Brewery and Tap Room. So come down and join us. You can go to either the events calendar that was sent out by Kaylee or www.thebrwa.org and register for that. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Ted. That'll be a great event. Any other updates?
I have a quick update for the Blackstone River Coalition. We had our sampling last weekend for October, and then we're having another water quality sampling in November. And then that's our final one for the year. We applied for a grant through the DEP, the water quality monitoring grant. And hopefully, I think we're supposed to know about that in January. So hopefully, we are chosen to be funded for that, and that would fund our water quality program, but then also looking at some hot spots. One was Coal Mine Brook, which is a tributary to Lake Quinsigamond, and Katie Liming helped us work on that. So thank you. And the Lake Quinsigamond Watershed Association, Barbara Kickham from there. And then we're also hoping to get through that grant a couple continuous monitoring probes for initially we were going to have them in two tributaries to the Manchac Pond that are cold water fisheries that we're concerned about. They're good now and we want them to stay that way, and they're having some development pressure there. And then also to build on what Ted for the BRWA, I've been working with Joanne Holohan from there, and the BRWA is using funding from the SEP and from Narragansett Bay Estuary Program to do education outreach in schools, especially focusing in Worcester. So we did a really fun Watershed and Us program at the Quinsig Elementary School. And Joanne was able to partner with the DPW, the city, and bring out one of the trucks that cleans out the catch basins. So the kids got to see that, and it was like, ooh, gross, you know. So that was fun. And then we have some more programs happening in Millbury and Sutton. So it's exciting, and we talk about the CSO and storm drains, and hopefully the kids pass it on to their parents at home too. So
That's so awesome.
yeah, it's
That
fun.
education piece is so important. And kids just love trucks for some
Yeah.
reason.
And
That's such a
grocery-
good idea. Love it. Great. Anyone else?
Yeah, real quickly, I'll go. Save the Bay is currently accepting applications. We are hiring a new baykeeper. So if you know anybody who loves Narragansett Bay and is interested in bringing their own unique flavor to Save the Bay's baykeeper position, check out our website. I think we are accepting applications. I've heard a couple different dates. I thought it was until the end of the month, but I think it's until next Friday. I think the website will specify. I'll drop the link in the chat though.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Anyone else? Okay. So as a reminder, we did change our meeting time to end at 11:30 instead of 12. So just because a lot of the time we end at like 11, and having that extra half hour is helpful, but we don't really need the whole hour. So that is all from me. Our next meeting will be November 22nd from 10 to 11:30. And thank you all for coming. Hope you have a great Halloween. Get to use all those costumes that we talked about. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kaylee.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good
Bye.
one.
Take care.
Have a good one.